What is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. However, you are consuming this podcast. I do appreciate you guys very much. Big shout out to the sponsor for today's show, the law office of William Mattar. Heard in a car, call William Mattar. 444-4444. Call William Mattar today to get the compensation that you deserve. All right, folks, a lot going on with the Buffalo Bills. We are live here on a Wednesday night. This is for the Thursday podcast. I am joined right now live by my good buddy over at The Athletic, host of Tim Graham and Friends. Tim Graham, a.k.a. you should change your handle now to Tim Graham 5232226. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
I wasn't sure what he was up to there. If it was a phone number, if we were all supposed to start calling it. I don't know. Is that 716, Terry? Or is it, what is that, 58? I don't know. What is it? 585?
It's been a long day, man. I'm sure it's been a very long day for you. By the way, Tim Graham at an undisclosed location again, too.
Always undisclosed.
Always undisclosed.
Well, at least for now, and it has been this way for a little bit. I'm also a little off center. I'm sorry that I'm kind of screwing around with my stuff here.
You're good.
Am I all right? Okay.
Yeah, you look good on my side, on my part here, man. Let me say this. By the way, we're going to obviously, I'm going to ask a lot of questions from you. You were there. Of course, you asked some poignant questions. I thought a really good job, by the way, by the media. Joe from Queens is going to call me a ball washer and a panderer, so let me get that out of the way real quick. I thought you guys...
What does that have to do with how much you liked how the media performed?
I thought it was a really good performance today. There was
totally independent of anything else I know about you. There
were a lot of tough questions today, and I appreciate that. I know a lot of people did. There were many people skeptical, are these guys going to be able to walk? I don't think
they were tough questions. I mean, we can get into that. My concern heading into it was we had an extra time to think about it. There was confusion. Also, we don't get many of these when it comes to the Bills because of their stability and the fact that there hasn't been a coaching change or a GM change. The owner never talks. And the court, maybe an injury. Josh is never hurt. So there's never the big news conference where everybody feels like they need to ask the question. And that it's going to be broadcast live on 247 Spectrum, WGR, wherever, all the streaming. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about it with some of my fellow reporters last night is like, the performative nature sometimes reporters have of wanting to make sure their question or their voice is heard on the broadcast. And we're like, hey, let's a moderator. Actually, I would love a moderator, somebody to stand and maybe call on people and allow follow-up questions and things of that nature. But I thought we did well. And also there was just natural curiosity. And I think that when there's no reason for hyperbole or any kind of sensationalism, and there wasn't. I mean, we came into this kind of confused and having a lot of blanks that needed to be filled. And so that's at its purest what journalism is supposed to be, because so did the fans. And there wasn't opinion in any of these questions today. I mean, but, and we'll get to that. But yeah, there was no grandstanding. There was no performative nature, no theatrics that I thought were going to happen. But we behaved ourselves.
I'll tell you this too, before we get into today, just collectively the last couple days or so as a Bills fan, okay, and I am a Bills fan. I don't run from that. I never say that I'm not. But I'll tell you what's been maybe the silver lining, like I'm trying to be a glass half full type guy as a Buffalo Bills fan here, that the last, say, 72 hours or so now is really distracted me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, from the fact that the New England Patriots right now are getting ready to play in an AFC championship game. Like,
A
Tim, if
pushover
no,
game, a pushover game, right? And it's going to take a minor miracle for the Patriots not to return to the Super Bowl.
yeah, 100%. And if it weren't for the fact that Shaw got fired and that this wild presser took place today, one that everybody is talking about, everybody has an opinion on, nationally too, not just on a local level, it's kind of distracted Bills fans from the point that, hey, New England managed to leapfrog the Bills in just 1 year, and they're going to be playing for an AFC title as favorites here just coming up in a couple days. You know what's the other thing about this week too, after today especially, that I find odd before we get into the specifics here? This week has kind of managed to make Sean McDermott and Keon Coleman now like social media martyrs all of
They're
a sudden,
sympathetic
Tim.
figures. Maybe not Keon Coleman's too much, but
Right.
okay, today for sure. Today for sure. There are a
Yeah.
lot of people who are feeling bad for Keon Coleman, and that's hard to do because sports fans are pretty unforgiving. And this guy just dropped a touchdown pass. Now,
Yeah.
granted, there was a penalty on the play, but had he caught that touchdown pass, Denver would have had to accept the penalty, and the Bills would have had another third down opportunity rather than having to kick the field goal. I don't want to go through all that whole thing, but
Right. You're
Keon
right. You're right.
Coleman stone drop in the end zone. Yeah, he does come off, as somebody who got bullied today by the owner and took some strays, as you would say. But Sean McDermott, I think, has been a sympathetic figure for a
Yeah.
couple of years, and I think it does go back to Tyler Dunn's series, in which Sean came out after that and was very vulnerable and very emotional, and I think he did very well for himself there to apologize and to come kind of had um, a reconciliation, and he changed after that, and he made concerted effort to change. And I think from about that point forward, fans started to see Sean McDermott in a totally different light, not the hardo, not the micromanaging hard ass. The guy who, when I made a joke during a news conference one time, told me, "Hey, now we're here. This is serious. Now we're here. We're all here to work." And I was like, well, "Come on, dude." That was his rookie year. He kind of looked at me like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, "It's sports, man." Um, but that guy changed to the. He was smiling and joking and all that type of stuff, and we didn't see Brandon Beane as much. And so, yeah, in many ways, it was Sean McDermott and Josh Allen as the two faces of the organization. And because Terry Pegula never talks, and Brandon Beane, kind of had uh, done the Homer Simpson gif and faded into the shrubbery after the WGR interview, and hadn't done a lot. This after Pat McAfee, and he did his victory lap after he stuffed Jeremy and Joe in the proverbial locker, and that didn't work out too well, or at least he thought he stuffed them in the locker. It turned out to backfire. But yeah, Sean, I think that the Bills have misread the room with this move, and maybe did not properly estimate the affection that Bills fans have cultivated, or that Sean McDermott has cultivated with Bills fans. I should to use the phrase properly. And Brandon Beane, meanwhile, has been very. He's been under fire, and this goes back, and this is an anecdotal thing, but my year-end mailbag last year was overwhelming questions and criticisms of Brandon Beane, not Sean McDermott. And the year before, it would have been all Sean McDermott. But by the end of the 2024 season, people were already starting to, have questions about Brandon Beane and whether he's done enough to build the roster, and whether it was time for him to go. And that was months before the WGR gaffe and the signing of two defensive linemen who had 6-game suspensions, and the Darius Slay bungle, and all kinds of, we don't need to go through it, but yeah, I do agree. I think that the fan reaction has been lopsided towards Sean McDermott and away from the team in the last 72 hours, and today did not help.
Well, before we
Did
get
not help
into
the team, that I should say.
right, before we get into what went down today being Wednesday for everybody who's listening to this on Thursday at some point, Do you feel like the team kind of you said reading the room wrong, the firing of Sean McDermott itself, the statement, everything from using the word admiral instead of admirable. They went, man, what, 30 some hours or something before they had anything that kind of felt warm towards what Sean McDermott did. And, the thank you photo and then a nice put together video that, it was a good video. But for, many, many, many hours, it felt icy. The firing on social media, at least anyway, to me, from my perspective, it almost felt icy. And it's not to say, well, whether it was deserved or not. We could debate that. We could talk about whether Sean McDermott should have been fired or not. But it just kind of felt like the way it went down, and maybe the aftermath more on social media too. It didn't feel right to me. I don't know how you felt about that, or what you've heard, or what your perception has been with that leading into this press conference today.
Yeah. So regarding all of those things, it was totally botched from a public relations standpoint. The firing of Sean McDermott in and of itself, I think fans would understand and would maybe not have such a strong reaction about.
Right.
Even if it's Sean McDermott fired and Brandon Beane keeps his job, period, I think fans would be okay with that. Where I think that I think fans are more, the majority of the fans fall in the category of, if McDermott had to go, then so did Beane, number one. But the overwhelming reaction that I've gotten or seen on social media, heard from in my mentions and in my emails and my texts and hearing from people around the league, is Sean McDermott being fired and Brandon Beane getting a promotion. That is the incongruity that people really can't understand. And we asked Terry Pegula about this about 6 to 10 different ways. And I don't know that he either understood the concept of how it didn't add up, that one guy, these guys came in at the same time. Now, granted, they had two different jobs, but their record is the same. Their successes and failures are the same. They each got to wherever all those seeds that Terry Pegula rattled off. Sean McDermott earned them, as did Brandon Beane. But there was this, and the failures, all the failures too. Now, granted, 13 seconds, you can say that's Sean McDermott, but then, a certain draft pick you could say is Brandon Beane. Or, you can go around and rate them. But this was always a Lennon and McCartney production, to where they shared credit, and you should share credit. And you're kind of left to wonder who really did write that song. All those Beatles songs, you probably know a McCartney song versus a Lennon song, but the writing credit was always Lennon and McCartney, always together. And that was Beane and McDermott. And at some point, I guess Terry Pegula or Brandon Beane, the front office, all of them determined that it wasn't all the same. And those are the questions I tried. I asked a couple of questions, and so did many of the media members, of where do we get to where one guy's fired and the other one's promoted? And Terry Pegula could never really articulate that. And that is, like, I think the root of the angst and the confusion and the nervousness that you might have about these people picking your next head coach is, why can't you articulate why one guy got a pat on the back, not only a pat on the back, he got pushed up the ladder, and the other guy got, the hatch got pulled on him, and when he went down the trap door, when everything is way more intertwined than they made it out to be. They were so hesitant or reluctant or refused to even acknowledge or give credit to the coaching that was done. Everything that was good was because of the roster.
Yeah.
And that's where we kept kind of asking these questions. Well, where does the coaching come in? Why can't, Terry was just like, well, and then he summed it up. He said, great roster, good coaching, no Super Bowl appearances. And to me, I get that. And maybe you have your reasons for that, but articulate them, please. And then there were a couple of rakes that were stepped on along the way. But and to me, I didn't get the first question. There was a pregnant pause and I jumped on it, but I had 3 questions I wanted to have answered today. And I knew they were probably going to be asked at some point, but we didn't know that we were going to get these guys for an hour. So I had 3 questions, and this room is packed. And I think if I get these 3 questions, that I'm set. And there's going to be so much content, and material, and answers. But the question that I had to ask first was not on my list. Was after Terry Pegula's opening statement, pretty much, are you saying this guy got fired because of a blown call? Because that's what it sounded like to me. That the dejection in this locker room was too much for Terry Pegula to bear. He had to make a change. And in that, he said, and it was a blown call. It was a catch. I told Josh Allen it was a catch. And well, okay, well, then if it was Terry, that's a game-winning field goal right there. And then Sean McDermott's getting ready for the AFC Championship game. So it was just, there were so many threads to pull on, and unanswered this and confusing that. And it was just, to me, and they had extra time to do this. We were wondering, because of the weather. I don't think they were dragging their feet per se. I don't think it was like, wow, they are, are we ever going to hear from One Bills Drive? I mean, a lot of people were worried, but I think a lot of it had to do with the weather and getting a lot of people together, and they wanted to get their ducks in a row, as they should. But the fact that they didn't announce, had they announced on Monday that there will be a news conference Wednesday morning, nobody would have cared that they waited 2 days to do it, right? Just as long as there was an announcement, we know when it's coming. The fact that there was a mystery as to when we were going to have this news conference until last night added to the drama, confusion. Do these guys know what they're doing? That type of mood heading in. But yeah, they had extra time to all get on the same page, and it just didn't engender a lot of faith. And that's not to say that they're not going to get it done, but there are a lot of easy things. There are things that you would think would be easy for a multi-billion-dollar enterprise to be able to pull off in 72 hours that these guys weren't able to do in terms of being in harmony.
Go back a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about Lennon and McCarthy. My first thought, quick little sidebar here, reminds me of one of your radio shows way back in the day. Didn't you have a conversation about the Beatles being overrated?
Yeah, I don't
remember that shit.
And again, the entire episode. So we had Jeff Myers on, and Jerry Sullivan was on, who's a big Beatles fan, and we had our producer at the time was a drummer. I can't remember what, anyways. And I just thought it was a concept that it's possible for the greatest thing of all time to be overrated. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore. And the entire time it was me defending the concept that I think the Beatles sucked, which wasn't it. And so, but it was like, you can be great and be overrated, right? There are people, Harold Baines is overrated because he's in the Hall of Fame, but he's still a great player. I'm not comparing Harold Baines to the Beatles, but
for sure. So, and by the way, thank everybody who's popping in on the live. We're almost at 1,200 people already watching this live. I appreciate everybody who's checking in with us.
Mickey Mantle, maybe he's overrated.
Maybe. No.
Because he's so iconic. He's so iconic, but there are so many people that are better. There are people who just love the Mick.
That's fair.
A lyrical name, and playing for the Yankees and replacing DiMaggio. And yeah, he was great. Maybe he's overrated. How about Tony Gwynn? Underrated.
He's definitely underrated for sure.
See, but he's in the Hall of Fame. Anyways, that's a rabbit hole.
So we get to the press conference here on Wednesday. Well, let me start by asking you this. And by the way, for everybody out there, Tim and Joe B collaborated on an outstanding article with a lot of their takeaways from Wednesday's press conference. That's in The Athletic. I'll make sure I put a link to that for everybody in the show notes. So what was if you didn't know ahead of time, and if you did, let us know, but what was your level of surprise, if not maybe even shock, that Terry Pegula stayed and took questions the entire time? I don't know if you or the media were privy to that happening beforehand, because my expectation certainly was he was going to come out, make a statement, give the mic to Brandon Beane, and just bounce, or at least going, off to the side or something. He stayed there and answered questions. I don't know if he's happy he did that now or not. That remains to be seen. But did you know ahead of time that was going to be the case?
No, I was pleasantly surprised. It was just in the announcement that he was going to be there. But he's been at other events in which he reads from a prepared statement and then, disappears. So we did not know. But I think that there was an expectation that he would, because of the moment. And I think that also, Brandon Beane was taking a lot of fire. And if he were to go out there by himself, that would have been it could have been ugly for Brandon Beane. I don't mean from a media standpoint attacking him, but how can Brandon Beane answer the question, why did you get promoted? There's really only one guy who can answer that question, and that's Terry Pegula. So it would have been a flaming disaster if Terry hadn't been there. So I expected it just from it's common sense standpoint. Now that doesn't necessarily mean, so I guess I was mildly / pleasantly surprised that he did talk, but I wasn't shocked.
Okay. I'm not really going chronologically on how things happen, but when they were talking about the search for the next head coach, it's going to be Terry, it's going to be Brandon, the assistant GMs, Picolelli. They mentioned Laura Pegula, and I was like, is that
highly
that's
involved?
Interesting to me. Why? Explain, elaborate. Why would she be involved? I'm not trying to sound disrespectful. I mean, what? I don't know what, I guess maybe I don't know what her role is and what role it would be. And
it's a little bit of a mystery as to what her role is, her title, her partnership, what percentage of this what did she own of the team? And, there's, I had a report in which, the NFL has certain mechanisms in which there needs to be a succession plan in place and a family member involved. And there's all kinds of, mystery that the NFL does not like to talk about in its, when it comes to its ownership, because they like to change those rules so easily. It used to be you couldn't own a team in another sport in a competing market. You couldn't own, there's all kinds of things. Gambling, you weren't allowed to have any gambling interests. Of course, that's way out the window.
Right.
And then the NFL would just kind of change everything on the fly, and you wouldn't know about it until somebody broke what you broke. You thought they broke the law, and then they're like, oh no, it hasn't been that way for 7 years. We changed that law back or whatever, that bylaw. So anyways, so in terms of title and all those things, it's kind of a mystery. If you go take a look at the Bills website, or Google Buffalo Bills front office directory, they don't have it anymore. They don't put anything up there anymore. In fact, it used to be, prior to Pete Gwelly being hired, it said under executives, it had Brandon Beane, general manager, Sean McDermott, head coach. To which point I had to ask their executive, their PR, their communications executive, Derek Boyko. I'm like, are these guys executives of the team? Like, no, we just have to put something there, but everything else is blank. So we don't really know who's doing what and who's got what rule unless we, get an announcement or something on paper. But yeah, so Laura has gotten way more involved since Kim Pegula had her debilitating cardiac arrest, and Kim's inability to help. I think Terry wanted somebody in the family that he could lean on, and Laura has been a pillar, from what I understand, in that regard, in helping Terry. The other children have been either busy doing other things or maybe too inexperienced to hold that role, but Laura had been involved with Terry's petroleum businesses and had experience as an executive, and and of course she's from his first marriage, so she's older too. So that was who he kind of brought into his inner circle to help him with the Bills and the Sabres.
Going back to Terry speaking today, whether it's on the football side or whether the hockey side, he doesn't do this, and people want to hear from the owner. My take on that right now is like, well, first of all, I mean, it's obvious he's not good at these things. This is not a strength of his for sure. But that aside, and maybe it wasn't done in the best way, but I also kind of feel like he's not a liar either. Like what he was saying to me, my interpretation, at least, of some of the things that he was saying was his truth, at least. I kind of felt that way. Maybe a little too honest with a few things. Like with the Keon stuff, it's like, maybe he shouldn't have been fully honest or said anything at all, but he did a few times. I think at the end of the day, Tim, like the Sean McDermott thing was just, I just feel like it was handled wrong, and it became more than it needed to be. You could have, hey, listen, we have a great team. We've been in the mix every year, but we can't get over the hump. It's time to switch directions, and we're looking for somebody who can help us get over the hump. To me, if you do that, I don't think you get anything, the backlash that we're getting now. What did you think? What do you think?
So I'm just jotting down a note because I want to remember to say it later, but it's not what you asked now. So regarding what Terry said and what Brandon Beane said, the thing that I said the lack of harmony early on, and there was a lot of damage control that had to be done after the fact. Afterwards, there were John Wara, the Associated Press, got some information from Terry in which he said, no, I was not referring to Sean McDermott when I talked about Keon Coleman and the coaches wanting him. And there were some other, I'm hearing that phone calls have been made to certain members of the media to try to massage this or to try to, take a little bit of the sting out of that. But there were so many things that didn't add up in the news conference, Keon Coleman being the prime example. So let's stay with that, in which Terry said one thing and had to be corrected later on. There needed to clarify it's something totally opposite. And then they compromised and met in the middle at some point. So, I mean, there are only three options, right? When somebody was up there talking there and you went, let's say Terry Pegula talking about Keon Coleman. He's either lying, he's mistaken, or he's telling the truth. And any of those three things are problematic because the telling of the truth meant he had to be corrected by, and that means Brandon Beane's lying, right? If he was telling the truth about what happened with Keon Coleman, then Brandon Beane was lying about what his take on what happened with Keon Coleman. All right. So there's that. Or Terry Pegula is mistaken about his receiver, who is very prominent on the team, and he doesn't remember it right. That's a problem too, right? You think that he would remember it correctly and sharply, but he doesn't. Where did this idea pop into his head that this happened this way? Or he was lying, which is also problematic. Again, I'm not accusing him of anything, but those are the only three options. And all three of them, with the way that jumble happened, it could, again, this is a theoretical. I'm not saying, again, I'm not accusing. I'm just kind of sorting through the optics of this. Perhaps Terry, in his fatherly way, was just trying to stand up for his general manager. Like you said, he even said that, this guy's been taking a lot of heat and he sits there and he takes it and he doesn't say anything, almost as though that, that's something to be admired. And it is, I think, that trait, if that's true. So I think that, Terry, in a misguided way, was just trying to step in front of some criticism for Brandon, and in the process botched it, whether he misremembered or fibbed or flat told the truth, accidentally told the truth. And in Brandon's mind, he's like, oh shit, I got to correct this or fix it, because now general manager, if we got to, now we got to, do we have to trade this guy now? The owner has just said this guy wasn't our choice. We've already had trouble getting the most out of him. And now how reluctant is he going to be to give us his all in OTAs and training camp when the owner just said he wasn't really who we wanted? All these things maybe are running through Brandon's mind. And then he gets to a point where I have to do some damage control here. So if I have to trade this guy, other teams think that he actually has something. So then eventually Brandon starts talking about how great talent, starts going through what a great training camp he is. Didn't matter who he was going up against. The game against the Ravens, he's come, any problems he's had, he's owned them, all the things that you would try to, so yeah, it was just, and it's interesting that became such a story. I mean, that's what how much of a gaffe it was. The head coach just got fired 2 days ago, and the owner's talking for the first time in 6 years, I think it was. And Keon Coleman, of all people, I mean, Keon Coleman is just trying to live his life right now, right? He just had an awful season.
Dude's catching strays, like you said. Like, God damn, man.
He's in Florida or Louisiana or wherever, just trying to chill and, geez, and yeah, so what happens at 6:00? I turn on Sports Center. I just want to see what's going on in sports, not football, not the Bills. What's going on in sports? 6:00, top of the hour, right? It's when you tune into the news and you get the number one story. I think I tuned in at 6:01 or 6:02, but it's Booger McFarland talking about, well, it's Terry Pegula talking about Keon Coleman. It's the clip. And I'm like, holy shit, this is at the top of the hour. And then they bring in Booger McFarland to say, how does this happen? Where can they do with Keon Coleman now? And Booger McFarland saying, well, I don't know if you can come back from this. Can Keon Coleman play another down in Buffalo? And I'm like, holy smokes, this is the lead story nationally. And then it was followed up by, well, now let's go to PTI. And they have like a bonus segment of Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon rehashing the Bills news conference. I mean, that's like the A-list segment of, that's in which Michael Wilbon eventually says, if Terry Pegula really fired Sean McDermott after losing to Denver, because he lost to Denver, I think he said, this is totally insane, is what he said. So the Bills making a great impression nationally. I guess maybe we can talk about that too, the national versus the local. But yeah, the national really kind of clinged on the gossipy, thing, which is Keon Coleman, who in the grand scheme of the Bills really is a bit player, unless you want to talk about a draft asset that is proving to be squandered, or obviously it's not working out. But in terms of being a player for the Bills, if Keon Coleman never plays another down for the Bills, it probably is not going to matter. But it's such a gossipy thing to talk about that the owner is a buffoon, is what pretty much Booger McFarland and ESPN and everybody's talking about.
Well, I'll say from a local standpoint, it's a big deal. What was said about Keon is a big deal. There's no way around that. Nationally, it's probably a bigger deal. I would say locally, we know that's not the biggest story. There were much bigger components to today than Keon Coleman. But Keon Coleman is the soundbite that people in the national media are going to cling on to. But I got to be honest with you, and I'm not the person who will defend the national media often, but they kind of should. It should have been said. That didn't need to be said. And look, I'm not very high on Keon Coleman. I thought before today there was a good chance that he might have already played his last game in Denver and he gets moved during the offseason. But again, whether he's in Cancun, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, wherever the hell he is right now, he just kind of got dragged into it. I don't know. I just thought it was a really bad look. And
real quick,
low-hanging fruit for the national media, but
right.
I mean, you gave it to him.
So we talked about this in the media room. It was an open conversation for a little bit as we were kind of gathering ourselves after we, the initial, it's over and we scramble to get some work done. Let's say maybe an hour later as the dust is settling a little bit and everybody's onto their second and third thing that they're writing or working on. And the conversation just kind of organically pops up. And we'd seen the feedback, on social media from the national, folks, whether it's Bill Barnwell or Mina Kimes or, Ryan Clark or, you fill in the blank, all the people who were watching this, about how awful it was. And I don't want to name names because I don't want to say who was, backing up who, and, I don't want to, they're not on this podcast.
Right.
So somebody says, did Terry do that bad a job? I thought Terry did pretty well. And then another member of the Bills media says, I thought so too. I thought he did okay. And there was kind of a back and forth of, maybe the national media is not getting it right. Now, to which I said, this is my opinion. And I don't even know if I was in the majority or in the minority. I don't know, because not everybody gave their thought. But I said, I thought it was bad because the part about, that he fired Sean as an emotional decision, he kind of he pretty much said that it was an emotional decision on a bad call that, Terry brought up the bad call. He brought up that the quarterback wouldn't even look at him. If Josh Allen stands up in his locker stall and talks with Terry Pegula for 20 seconds, is Sean McDermott still employed today? I don't know. I mean, if people aren't crying as much, the reasons that Terry kind of leaned into seemed a little weird. And the timeline didn't add up. I thought that was bad. The idea that Brandon Beane didn't know about it until Monday morning. Well, the announcement came out at 10:30 and Brandon Beane had a promotion. So did Pete Gwelly, major promotions. They became presidents within the organization, within the Bills, presidents, not just like a bump up and, general manager and director of football. No, they were, that's huge in the NFL. There are all kinds of protocols and they have access to different things now as team presidents. that come with new contracts, right? Raises if you're a president now. How does that happen? One morning in a couple hours, and anyways, all that stuff just didn't. And the Keon Coleman unforced error. I mean, there were just so many things, and his inability to articulate, as I said before, the difference why he weighted roster over coaching and gave so much more credit to the roster than he gave to the coaching aspect of it. I thought it was a terrible news conference for Terry Pegula and for Brandon Beane.
I tend to agree with you on that. In your opinion, and obviously we'll never know, but in your opinion, this being an emotional charged decision based on his words and his actions, if the Bills, Brandon Cooks catches that ball, they call it a catch, all right? And the Bills kick a field goal and they win this game. They go on next week to the AFC title game and they lose. Well, it would be New England. They get to the AFC title game, but they win this game and they lose. If that happens, and let's say they lose by 2 touchdowns, whatever. But it's not an emotional end of the game kind of thing. But they get to the championship game, they lose. If that happens, do you think this move still gets made?
I don't know, but to hear Terry Pegula say it, it would bank on how emotional the locker room was. If the locker room was palatable, according to what Terry Pegula said, that the fact that that everybody was so distraught and devastated is what clicked for him that a change had to be made. So, if they lose in a different, and let's think about why Josh Allen his quarterback was crying. He wants to protect his quarterback. Okay, I get it. Maybe Josh Allen was busted up for exactly the reason Josh Allen said he was. He thought he let his team down.
Yeah.
He had 4 turnovers. 2 of them were clearly his fault and bad. The play, how it ended, the Bills just to be that close, to go through overtime. I mean, there are so many things that go into that for an athlete, and Terry Pegula's been around it. He's no piker. I mean, he's been around it, but to get wrapped up into that emotion right then and make the decision right then, as he says he did. I don't know that it's as Michael Wilbon said, it's difficult. I'm not saying it's either Michael Wilbon said it's insane. It's difficult for me to believe that he made that decision in the heat of the moment like that, and then didn't clue in his general manager or anybody else in the organization or his quarterback. They let Sean McDermott do exit interviews on Sunday, which is another curious thing. I just get. I mean, look, then everybody in the titles, the promotions. I mean, this to me seems like it's been in the works for a while, and they were just looking for the right time to do it. That Sean McDermott had run his course, and they needed a time to do it. And that Brandon Beane is taking a lot of shrapnel, and Stevie Johnson calls him Judas. Richie Incognito's dumping on him. LaShawn McCoy's dumping on him. Jordan Phillips says it's sickening. Daquan Jones, Taron Johnson, players on the team, off the team, people around the league. I mean, Littlefinger. I mean, there are all kinds of Brutus, Benedict Arnold. I mean, it was for 48 hours. Is it so far-fetched, Pat, to think that the Bills just decided the mission of this news conference is to fix Brandon Beane's reputation and to make sure that he is as far away from this firing as possible? I mean, I'm not claiming that to be the case.
It makes sense.
But is it so far-fetched?
No.
With as far-fetched as a lot of the things we heard today, some really far-fetched shit, is it so far-fetched as to say, man, we can't keep going on with everybody thinking our general manager stabbed the head coach in the back? And we need to make sure that this was Terry's decision all the way, so much so that Brandon didn't even know about it for a day and a half. Maybe that's really what happened, but it is as again, to quote Michael Wilbon, it's insane.
You used the word at the beginning of the show in terms of the media. You didn't feel that there was anything performative going on with the media. I feel there was one part of this press conference to me that felt performative, and it was by the general manager. And that was when Joe B, your colleague at The Athletic, asked an excellent question, about any frame. I thought he framed it really well, too, about, the character thing. And then Brandon Beane goes on a tirade. That felt a little bit, I'm going to be honest, and it's just one person's opinion, mine opinion, that felt imperative. It felt performative to me.
I don't think it was.
The power struggle thing, and
I'll quibble with you,
ahead.
Pat. I don't think it was performative, but it hit the nerve that I was just talking about.
Sure.
That was the raw spot. Is people think I'm an asshole. Like, I went from being big baller Bean to Judas, a popular player. I mean, it was Stevie Johnson. A lot of people saw the tweet. He put out, it was, people from, he even named Damon University and spelled it correctly. It was nice of Stevie to know his community and pick a local college. He said, I don't know what it was. Anthropologists or scientists at Damon University have come up with a recreation of what Judas looked like. And it was Brandon Beane, like in a, he talked about his wife being in tears because of what's being said about him. I'm sure it's been a very difficult 48 hours for Brandon Beane. And so I don't think it was performative. He got red in the face. His tears, I don't want to say his eyes got glassy. He was in his feelings. He was hurting right there, and he was defending himself. So no, I don't think that was acting, but I think that's the nerve we were talking about. And I think it speaks to one of the missions of the day was to first to try to heal the general manager.
According to both Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula, there was no power struggle. Terry Pegula said if there was, and then Brandon Beane tried to pull a power play, he'd be out too, which led to some awesome Sabre memes on Twitter throughout the day, by the way. But do you buy that? Do you buy that there wasn't a power struggle, Tim? And if there was a power struggle, at what point do you feel that power struggle shifted in favor of Brandon Beane? Because it always felt, to me at least anyway, it always kind of felt like Sean McDermott was more of the one that likes more of a Pegula guy. Like, I don't want to say the teacher's pet. That's not the best word, but do you buy that? Do you buy there's no power struggle? And if so, when did it switch?
No, I think there was a power struggle, and they did deny Vic Carucci's story about Vic Carucci reported that 5 weeks ago, Sean McDermott had criticized the roster and Terry Pegula, and Brandon Beane took exception to that, and things had been rocky ever since. And Vic is close with. I'm sorry, it's a sin. I don't want to do that. I almost gave up a source on. So I almost did. I almost did. I trust that where Vic got that from. But Terry and Brandon denied it, that was true. And I also have my own reporting that I would rather produce for The Athletic than tip off anybody here.
Don't blame me.
But I think it goes back to 13 seconds. And there have been there's been some cloak and dagger in the background, and it's both ways. I think that at some point, people start to catch wind of when somebody's out to get you, and or vice versa. Maybe who's to say that Sean McDermott wasn't also trying to make a power play on Brandon Beane? I don't think that Sean McDermott is innocent here. I mean, he is a alpha male, a leader. So is Brandon Beane. Two guys who are, are very confident in who they are and what they do and what they stand for, and are going to protect themselves. And not to say necessarily in a selfish way, but if they believe this is the way forward for the team, then they're going to defend that. and they're going to find ways to do it. And maybe sometimes it gets outside of the team, it gets outside of the walls of one Bills drive. And, you know, there's all kinds of subterfuge that goes on. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, kind of in sarcasm about, you'd think a multi-billion-dollar industry would be able to get something together. Well, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. A lot is at stake here. Careers, a lot of money, power, glory, championships, people fighting for the same thing. And if they differ, they will go to great lengths to win out over the, obviously competitors, right? And so, yeah, I don't think it was lopsided. It was like Sean McDermott was a lamb in a field, and Brandon Beane was a wolf that was coming to get him. I think maybe it was a couple of wolves who were both at one point they were in the same pack, and at some point they drifted apart, and didn't maybe see things the same way.
There's a statement that was put out. I saw a couple reporters put it out there about Josh Allen. Very vanilla statement that he appreciated Sean over the last 8 years, and he'll be part of the team that helps find the next head coach. I was surprised to learn, I want to know if you were too, that Josh was never informed, allegedly never informed of this decision. So he had no role in, at least in the firing part of it. And I mean, I'm almost led to believe, based on the way it was said, that he probably found out around the same time like Adam Schefter and Aim Rappaport and everyone started tweeting it out. Were you surprised to hear that, whether it's true or whether it's not true, that he had no role in this and no input in him being fired and didn't even know about it until after the fact?
I mean, if you're going to say that Brandon Beane didn't know until Monday morning, you're going to, right? I mean, you're not going to be able, yeah, but I talked to Josh. I mean, that would totally blow the story if it,
sure.
That is what, so no, I don't, that doesn't surprise me, I guess, and should the quarterback have a say? Not necessarily. I mean, yes, Josh Allen is the second most powerful man in that organization. And you can argue in some ways, when it comes to public sentiment, maybe the most powerful man in the organization, even more powerful than Terry Pegula himself, in terms of what he could do. If Josh Allen came out tomorrow and blasted the organization, Katie bar the door. I mean, that is, I guess everybody should be thankful that the PSLs are already sold, if that's the case. But Josh Allen has incredible power. He has the power of the public behind him. And the fans would get in line right behind Josh Allen, way more so than they, especially at this juncture, than they would Terry Pegula or Brandon Beane. Josh Allen's not going to do that, but that was just my way of illustrating what type of power he actually could wield and the leverage that he does have, whether he chooses to use it or not. But I can't remember what the other part of your question was, Pat.
I think that was it. Just were you surprised that Josh had no role in this, apparently, input in Sean getting fired, that Terry didn't even tell him he was going to fire him, and that he allegedly didn't find out until most people found out, like the rest of his teammates found out. They all found out at the same time.
The one thing I'm curious about, though, I mean, with the explanation that was given at the beginning during Terry Pegula's opening statement for firing Sean McDermott, how does Josh Allen feel about that? How does it feel to know that your demeanor after the game was a major factor in the owner's decision to fire your head coach?
Yeah.
I mean, how fair is that to Josh Allen? I guess it creates a nice picture and a vision and a scene. Terry Pegula even said it as though it was maybe written for him. Let me take you into the locker room. That there was this, is it's the theater of the mind, right? And he wanted you to picture Josh Allen at his locker stall crying. And that's not a stretch. We just saw him crying at the lectern on Saturday night. So imagine poor Joshy, our Josh, crying in his locker stall, and Terry Pegula walking up to him. You can almost picture him putting his hand on Josh's shoulder pads and saying, that was a catch, but Josh won't look up. And how are we going to get our Josh back? So it was almost, so I would like to know if Josh Allen's on board with that. Like, hey, Josh, we're just going to say it was because you were really upset. Well, that puts Josh in a weird spot now, doesn't it, when he talks to reporters?
I've seen some tweets too. I've seen some tweets saying, well, congratulations, you got your coach fired because you were crying after the game. I think that's, a little ridiculous. I'm with you, dude. He was crying because he was spent.
It's hyperbolic, but if the owner himself said it. I mean, that was a reason. I mean, he could have given all kinds of reasons. He could have said he could have said 13 seconds in his initial statement. He could have said all kinds of things, but he wanted to paint this picture of emotion, and it backfired because you don't want your owner to make emotional decisions like that, and you shouldn't pin it on your quarterback. And you shouldn't try to defend your general manager by saying that draft pick was the coach's. There's all kinds of things Terry Pegula wanted to do in terms of make it visceral or make a Bills fan try to win them over through their emotion and saying, yeah, you know what, you're right, Terry. This was the right thing to do because that's how it makes me feel better about what, yes, we need to defend you. But no, it really comes off as, really? That's how you make the decision? And now you got to pick the replacement and we're supposed to, all the things that, and I tweeted this before I wrote my very first word for The Athletic. People used to ask me, hey man, how is it that the Sabres and the Bills could be run so differently? And I was like, well, and I'd give some examples and I'd say, just be thankful that the Bills are not run like the Sabres. I can't say that anymore. You now are lumping in, you used to be, Terry got it right. He got the people in place. The grownups are in the room. Now he can sit back and watch the wins pile up and the seats fill up and have a chance to win the Super Bowl every year with Josh Allen at quarterback. And hopefully he gets the right supporting cast and you get the right bounce and you get the right call, all the things that are not in your control, injuries, officiating, weather, all kinds of things that obviously out of your control. The things that are in your control, do maximize them to the best of your ability. And then the Sabres were always wow, what a wreck. Well, now you can lump those teams back together as you're going to start talking about, this is the guy who picked Don Granato. This is the guy who picked Kevin Adams. This is the guy who picked the guy who wore the gardening gloves. The coach who replaced Lindy.
Ron Ralston?
Ron Ralston. Yeah, he wore gardening gloves and he didn't wear it's the guy who brought in Phil Housley and fired him quick. This guy's going to be making the decision again. We thought we were done. If you're a Bills fan, you're saying we didn't have to worry about that guy getting involved anymore. And now we do again. And we just were reminded why we don't like that for 54 minutes on live television and live radio. Like, oh my God, this guy. That's right. We haven't seen him for 6 years. This is the guy who's about to make the decision.
There's two things specifically about what Terry Pegula hit on today that really bothered me. The first we've already covered, and that's Keon Coleman. Just, again, he didn't need, I understand, well, I don't understand. I guess I'm trying to see his point why he would say that, to kind of save Brandon Beane some grief. You hurt the team in the process. If they want to trade him this offseason, Tim, you talk him up. You have the GM talking about, we're going to work, do this and that, maybe get some value. You pretty much just said, this guy's got no value to us, basically, with what they said today. And then the other thing is this. I got a take for you and for everybody who's listening. Well over 2,400 people actually live right now. In fact, dude, Tim, you got my son in the live chat. I think I've done about 100 live shows, and I don't think I've ever seen him in the chat ever comment. He's in here for this one anyway. But I got a take for all you guys.
Is 2,400 good?
That's great. That's double what we usually would get right now, especially during the week. That's awesome. But here's my take. It's something that Terry said about Brandon Beane that really, it just doesn't sit well with me. It bothers me a little bit. He said that Brandon Beane, to go get Josh Allen, he basically pulled a Houdini. I say he got equally lucky, if not more. Now, Brandon Beane did get from 21 to 12 that year in the draft. Before the draft, he traded. He got up to 12. And yes, he did ultimately move up to 7 with Tampa, and he got Josh Allen there. But dude, again, they started this draft at 12. They were helpless before Cleveland took Baker Mayfield over Josh Allen at 1. Helpless when the Jets took Sam Darnold over Josh Allen at 3. Right away, that could have been your guy gone instantly. He was at their mercy with those picks. And then Denver passed on Josh Allen because they wanted Bradley Chubbs, and then he moved up. Before that, they took Quentin Nelson. Like, it was a great job for him to pick Josh Allen, but he couldn't do anything about those first handful of picks. There's just as much luck, and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to just shit all over Brandon Beane here, but there was a lot of luck to him and him getting Josh Allen. It's not like he maneuvered all the way to the top of the board and took Josh Allen over Darnold or Baker Mayfield. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what today's news conference was. It was it was like stating a case at a trial. They're only going to bring in evidence that suits their case, right? And they're going to shine, try to give Brandon Beane as much shine as they can, because again, I think a big mission of that news conference was to build him back up and to try to claim back some of his big baller Beane status and make him not seem as though he's a scoundrel. So that was a big mission.
Do you think with the WGR thing last year, because Brandon Beane it wasn't that long ago where it was almost felt like you talked about this earlier, kind of like almost flipped. Brandon Beane was the very popular one, wearing the sunglasses, all the memes on social media, big baller Beane. Do you feel like that WGR moment last year with the receivers was kind of a seminal moment in kind of change in public sentiment towards him?
Well, like I said, it was the end of the 2024 season when I got all of those negative entries, submissions into my mailbag. So and that was months before the draft and the WGR interview.
Yeah.
We used to hear Josh Allen say it all the time. In Beane we trust, as godlike status. I mean, that saying is in God we trust, right? And you're replacing God with Beane. I know it's playful and cheeky, but I mean, that's the role. And he had a bit of a mystique about, because he could trade. He was a wheeler dealer and he would get Stephon Diggs. And there are a bunch of, big splashes that he was able to do and that were fun. He did some fun moves, but they haven't necessarily worked out. And a lot of his early picks, I mean, we don't need to go through them. And I'm sure we're going to hear about how all the picks that didn't work out were McDermott guys, and all the picks that did work out were Beane guys. And, people are probably working the phones right now. I say probably because that's an educated, what I'm about to say is people are getting calls from people. Oh, geez. How do I say this? A lot of networking is being done. A lot of massaging is being done. And I said this earlier. Yeah, there's going to be some messaging that you're going to see in certain areas of the media and from certain folks that is going to be aligned and look very similar about all the things that Sean McDermott was fucking up. And it's the messaging is beginning regarding how much Sean McDermott deserved to be fired, to try to counter the response that Sean McDermott got screwed.
Terry was asked, I'm not going to read like the whole question, but the short of it is he was basically asked by a reporter if he's going to start being available to talk more to you guys. And Terry talked about the personal reasons, and he mentioned that he's only been able to see his daughter Jessica play tennis a few times, mentioned that she was number 3 in the world. Do you think going forward that Terry Pegula will make himself more available going forward, or do you kind of get a sense that after the way today went that it's going to be maybe a significant amount of years before
I'm glad you brought that up, Pat. I'm not going to nitpick. I mean, Terry Pegula doesn't have to talk if he doesn't want to. I mean, he's not contractually obligated. This is a civic trust that he runs. I think he should be obligated to talk, but there's nothing that forces him to, especially when you talk about taking all the money that the Bills have for the new stadium, the public money. But again, just the civic trust aspect of it, of owning the sports teams in town, the Bills and the Sabres individually, the owner. They don't even have to own both of them. The owner individual of those teams should have to answer to the fans. I don't care if it's to the media. I don't care that they sit and talk to me or to Jay Skursky or to Matt Perrine. I don't care who they talk to. Talk to somebody. Have an open, have a town hall. The Sabres have done that once or twice. Go sit down and, invite people to come and ask their questions. Even pull them out of a hat. I don't know. But the thing that I thought was a little, and I'm not criticizing, obviously his family's been through a lot.
Sure.
But I don't think that that's an excuse. We see Terry Pegula all the time talking to the media you don't have to talk for an hour. And even if you did, that's not that big a deal. I mean, he can carve that out in his day. But even if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes at training camp practice at KeyBank Arena, to say, I get it. You can't go watch your daughter play tennis, but you're around a lot. We see him a lot. So that's just where I thought that was kind of a strange answer, as though talking to the media requires us to schedule it and we're going to do it. And there has to be, props and lighting and, no, we can all have our ugly floppy hats, our bucket hats on at training camp and be slathered with our sunblock and have our, be all sweaty messes out at 97 degrees in St. John Fisher. And Terry, it's for 10 minutes, talk about, what you think of, your roster or the stadium or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be a production.
The collaboration that they say, with the personnel, like it was certainly seemed today, at least anyway, that Sean McDermott had a very big say in draft picks, possibly free agents. They kind of went out of their way to say, at least I felt they did, about the Darius Slade thing, which turned into a kind of a fiasco this year and may or may not have hurt them in that Denver game, quite frankly. Do you get that sense? Do you think that this was really as much of a collaboration between Sean and Brandon when it came to picking players on this team and taking draft picks as they made it seem today? Or do you think that's more of a Brandon Beane GM call? Because I think that's what the biggest beef, Tim, with Brandon Beane is like
Lennon McCartney. We're left to guess. Yeah, I think you're left to guess. I mean, is that a Beane type of guy? Is that a McDermott kind of guy? Is that I don't know.
Because if it's true,
I'm a little less, and I don't know. I mean, and you got everybody throwing a little shade today, right? I mean, the Keon Coleman thing, the back and forth and Beane correcting Terry and then Beane saying, these are all my picks. Because of course he doesn't want the owner of, he wants credit for his picks. He's never going to say those aren't my picks, because then that seems to indicate that he's a bit neutered or that he doesn't have power. He wants to say, yeah, that's my team. I picked it. I'm the general manager. Of course, those are my picks. But the owner himself said that maybe some of these picks were the coaches, which leads you to believe maybe some of the good ones were McDermott players. Maybe some of the bad ones were being guys. I mean, it's not black or white.
Let's say, all right, so they're going to a new coach, obviously. Let's say, and I hope this doesn't happen, but let's just say
I got to get drinking at some point, Pat.
Yeah.
I've earned a drink today. Let's go.
Definitely earned a drink. We're wrapping up here too, but I want to ask you this. Let's say it doesn't work out for whoever the new coach is. We don't need to get into all the candidates and stuff today. I'll do that another time. Let's just say this team ends up.
I'm bad with that anyway. So let me be self-serving here. Mock drafts and coaching carousels. No, thank you. Because everybody, and we're going to hear it. And this is one of the things about coaching searches that I hate the most, having to cover one, is the national reporters who are clearly getting this information from the coaches' agents. And we are hearing about this obscure guy and that obscure guy and how they are the future of the NFL, right? And you just start hearing it just gets obnoxious and ridiculous. So,
this isn't a coach question.
What a great hire for this team. This guy's gonna, Adam Gase. I mean, Adam Gase was a great hire.
Rex Ryan was a great hire.
Oh my God, Chip Kelly. Everybody's fighting over Cliff Kingsbury for some reason. I mean, everybody's got the hot candidate that is going to absolutely kill it, and then they last, a season and a half.
I don't care who the coach is. It doesn't matter who it is. Let's just say the new coach, it doesn't work out. This is the last question, then I'm going to let you go here. You're right. You have definitely earned a couple brewskis. Let's say it doesn't work out for the new coach in 2026. This team ends up at the end of the year
Great question.
worse
Well,
off than
great
it
point I
was.
think you're going to make.
Like,
How about
does,
this, man? Let me turn it back on you because I said
Good.
I wrote this, and as I was writing it, I wasn't sure if I agreed with it, so I kind of fudged it a little bit. Would the Bills go this year? 13-4?
12-5.
12-5. If the next coach goes 12-5, is that a success or a failure? I don't think it's lateral. I think that's a failure because then why did we make the change?
Well, yeah, what'd you make the change for?
Or if, let's say this, 3 years from now, the Bills have still maybe gotten to one AFC championship game, but haven't gotten to the Super Bowl.
It's a failure.
Because
it has to be a failure because of the reason why you say you got rid of the coach because you couldn't get over that proverbial hump.
Yeah.
But the playoff hump, I should say. You get a new coach and you're no better off.
I agree with that.
But even let's say 3 years, let's just say next year. Let's just say there is the same this year or next year as they were this year, or maybe even a game worse. So maybe they get bounced in the first round. My question for you was, does Brandon Beane get on at what point does Brandon Beane become the guy who gets on the hot seat? Based on what you've seen today, their interactions.
I think he's on it already. From the public, he's on it already. Yeah, he's been on it, really. I mean, the people have been down on Brandon Beane for a while, and he hasn't done himself any favors. The WGR interview, most prominent. But yeah, no, he's definitely on the hot seat. Now he has nobody else to point a finger at. He's the president of football operations. He is the football boss. The coach, he's picking this coach. This coach is going to be on him. He's leading the search. All roads lead through Brandon Beane now. So there's going to be no more gray area as to who did what or who didn't listen to who, or did somebody disobey, or is there conflict or whatever? Is somebody trying to do an end around with the owner? Is somebody, he's in charge, and everything that happens is on his watch. So absolutely, he's already on the hot seat. But I think I'd heard this, so I guess we'd have to check. But I think the record for wins by a first-year NFL head coach is 13. So you're going to have, and it's happened once in NFL history. So to improve on Sean McDermott, you're going to have a historically great hire. And it's possible. And I've always said, hey, if they do fire Sean McDermott, I'm not going to say it's the wrong move until we see what happens. I mean, I think the odds are it's not going to work. It's not going to get better just because that's how it is. I mean, he built quite a bit. He did a lot of great things, and the chances of making a bad pick is pretty high. I mean, there's a lot of risk in this. But if they do make the right pick, that's then all this is moot, right? And this last hour and a half was pointless. But but you're going to have to nail this. You have to nail this, and I think that's really what's driving everybody a little batty, is that we got a look at the two guys who are going to be making the pick today, and the press conference did not go smoothly.
Last question for you. Do you think he operates under that premise right now that he is on the hot seat? And what I mean by that is, like, there's a report out there. There's been reports that he did not ultimately consummate a trade with Jalen Waddle because he didn't want to give up a draft pick this year. He wanted it to be in 2027. He doesn't trade down in the draft this year and accumulate future picks because he's got to win this year. He doesn't trade a talent, a veteran player for a future draft pick. Do you see them kind of operating? He made fun of the Rams and how they kind of sold out before. Does he become the Rams now?
Sounds like that would be going against his ethics, his football ethics. So that would be a departure, unless he was lying to us all this time. If he really believes that, then he should stay with it and not be tempted to make the big splash to potentially overextend himself just to prove, hey, I am the man, the capital T, capital N, M, the man. Okay, you are the man. But that doesn't mean you need to advertise it or do anything crazy here. do what's best for the team and not just make the big splash because people need to see one. And that's true. The fans are begging for that. If you're gonna, they want to see Big Baller Beane again. They want to see that guy come back that they believe in. In Beane we trust. So I hope that he doesn't feel compelled to have to appease that segment of the fans. Because the pressure is on, and I'm sure he's feeling not too pleased with how he's been depicted here these last 72 hours.
I agree. All right, let's leave that there, man. I appreciate your time so much. Again, I know it's been a very long day and night for you. Everybody, you already know Tim. Well, make sure you follow him on Twitter at @ByTimGraham. Especially get on board with The Athletic if you're not already. Everybody knows this. Tim, Joe B, they're the best at
Matthew Fairburn.
What they do. Sabres, sure. Sabres. I wish we had a little more time. The Sabres have been hot. This kind of sucks because they're playing so well. And for shows like this, they're a little bit glossy. And I know you do a better job. You and Jonah balance it much better than I do right now. You spend plenty of time talking Sabres on your show.
Sabres and Bills aren't allowed to be good at the same time.
I know. That sucks. All right. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Tim. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right, guys. And thank you so much for watching and for listening. One more show coming up for you tomorrow.